Lauren, what the hell are you doing? Untie her. Now. Ethan Grant's voice ripped through the still air of the kitchen like a thunderclap. There, in the middle of the kitchen, sat Clara Johnson, his mother. Not by blood, but by everything that had ever mattered. She was bound to a dining chair with a satin ribbon, arms tied awkwardly at her sides. Her head was bowed, her frail hands resting quietly in her lap, as though she'd accepted the humiliation. Lauren, his wife, stood beside her, one hand still clutching the ribbon's end. She froze like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. But her reaction wasn't embarrassment. It was calculation. "Ethan," she said, recovering quickly. "You're home early. I didn't expect. This really isn't what it looks like." Ethan didn't respond. His heart thundered in his chest. He crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt beside Clara, gently working the ribbon free from her wrists. Her skin was red where the fabric had bitten in. She looked up at him, her eyes moist but calm, like she'd been waiting for this moment for a long time, but not in relief, in resignation. "I'm okay, baby," she whispered. "It's fine." "No, it's not," Ethan said, his voice barely contained. Lauren huffed, setting the ribbon down on the island with a dramatic flair. "Oh, for God's sake, Ethan." She spilled soup all over the floor. The kitchen was a mess. I just needed her to stay still for a few minutes while I cleaned. But Clara didn't spill anything. Ethan already knew that, because a few hours earlier, before he arrived, Clara had tried to prepare a pot of butternut squash soup, wanting to surprise Lauren with something warm for the cold December evening. Her hands, arthritic and slow, had trembled slightly while she ladled the soup into bowls. A bit had splashed on the pristine white marble. "You stupid old woman," Lauren had screamed, loud enough to make Clara flinch. "I'm sorry, Miss Lauren. I didn't mean to." Clara had bent down immediately, trying to wipe the spill with a dish towel, but her fingers fumbled, and she lost grip of the rag. As she reached for it again, Lauren, still wearing her stiletto heels, stepped forward and intentionally planted her heel onto the back of Clara's hand. Clara had cried out softly, "Please, ma'am, please, my hand," but Lauren didn't move. "You people always make excuses," she spat, eyes narrowed. "Always breaking things, always turning homes into chaos. You think just because my husband pities you, you get to rule my kitchen? I was only trying to help. I don't need your help. And I sure as hell don't need a black nanny pretending she belongs here." Then, with chilling detachment, she added, "Maybe I should remind you of your place. It's no better." Lauren had grabbed a wide satin ribbon meant to wrap gifts for the charity auction and tied Clara to a chair in the breakfast nook. "You move, you squeal, or you tell Ethan anything," she said coldly, "and I'll make sure you're out of this house before sundown. He'll believe me. Not you." Clara hadn't fought back. She had just sat there, hands trembling, soup stain still drying on her blouse. Now, Ethan looked down at those same trembling hands, freed at last. He turned slowly toward his wife. Lauren's voice softened. "Ethan, I lost my temper, okay? I shouldn't have said what I said. She just keeps trying to do things that aren't her responsibility. I've told her before, but she doesn't listen. I didn't want to hurt her. I was just frustrated." Ethan stood up straight, towering over her. "You tied her up. It was a moment of bad judgment," Lauren said quickly. "She was getting in the way. I just needed 5 minutes to fix the mess. You weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow. I didn't mean anything by it." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Didn't mean anything?" "You stepped on her hand, Lauren." Lauren's eyes flickered. She exaggerated. "She didn't have to. I can see the mark." Clara had retreated into herself, standing near the sink now, silent as stone. Lauren tried again, more desperate now. "Look, Ethan, I know how much she means to you. I do. But she's getting older. She's forgetful. She wanders into rooms at night. She tries to cook, but she's not stable anymore. This house has to be presentable. You have clients. Press your image is everything." Ethan stared at her like she'd grown 2 heads. "My image?" "Yes," she said, her tone pleading. "I was trying to protect your peace. She needs professional care. Maybe a nice home where she can be looked after." Ethan felt his stomach twist. "You mean an institution?" Don't say it like that. What would you call it? He asked. She hesitated, then said carefully, a solution. Ethan turned to Clara, whose back was now facing them. She stood quietly, one hand holding the edge of the counter for support. Her shoulders sloped forward, defeated but still holding together what remained of her dignity. I'm going upstairs, Ethan said coldly. Cancel whatever dinner you planned. Ethan, wait. He didn't. He paused only to pick up the ribbon from the floor. He held it between his fingers for a long second, then dropped it into the trash can. On the way up to the master suite, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from his assistant. Flight went well. Need to confirm appointment with Marcus Rivera tomorrow. Ethan stared at the screen. Marcus Rivera, former LAPD detective, now a private investigator, specialized in elder abuse. Ethan typed 2 words. Book it. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. He hadn't just come home early. He had come home just in time. If this story moved you, tap like and comment where you're watching from. You might just find someone nearby watching too. The silence in the kitchen was heavier than the marble countertops and thicker than the polished air of the Malibu mansion. Clara stood by the sink, her back hunched slightly, one hand still resting on the counter for balance. Her other hand, the one Lauren had stepped on, trembled faintly in the soft overhead light. Ethan hadn't spoken since he returned from upstairs, having cooled his temper just enough to keep his fury contained. He'd changed out of his travel clothes and into something more comfortable, though comfort felt like a luxury now. He hadn't come down to argue. He came down for Clara. I made tea, she said softly, not turning around. I didn't think you'd be home so soon, so I used the lemon chamomile you like. Ethan stepped into the kitchen, noting how she subtly leaned against the counter to keep her balance. He walked over and gently reached for the teapot, pouring 2 cups. Steam curled from the cups like ghosts rising from the past. He handed one to her. She took it with both hands, careful not to look directly at him. That told him more than any words could. I shouldn't have tried to help, she said quietly, sipping the tea. I was only trying to make the place look nice. I knew she had the charity ladies coming, and I thought maybe, if I just stayed out of the way. You weren't in the way, Ethan said, his voice low and steady. You live here. You're part of this home. She finally turned to him, her eyes glassy. Not really. I've always been the quiet kind, Ethan. Some people forget I'm in the room, and maybe that's a blessing. It is Rand. Ethan's jaw tightened. She hurt you. She's just stressed. He took a long breath, then exhaled. She stepped on your hand, tied you to a chair, called you names. That's not stress, Mom. That's cruelty. At that word, Mom, Clara blinked rapidly, as if holding back tears. I don't want to make trouble between you and your wife. I don't want to be the reason you fight. Ethan set his cup down, leaned both palms on the counter. Then let me ask you something. What happens when I leave next time? What will she do then? Clara didn't answer. Exactly, Ethan said. I can't leave you here unprotected. Clara placed her tea down carefully, folding her hands in front of her. Ethan. Some women don't like the idea of sharing a home with someone who reminds them that love doesn't always follow bloodlines. That real family doesn't have to match in skin tone. He looked at her, eyes narrowing. She said something about that, didn't she? Clara paused. It wasn't the words, always. It was the tone, the glances, the little jabs when you weren't around. Like I was the dirt on the soles of her Louboutins. Ethan's chest burned. This ends now. I've already contacted someone who can help me look into everything. Someone who knows how to find the truth, even if it's hidden behind a perfect smile and socialite manners. Clara frowned. You mean a private investigator? He nodded. She took a step back, worry creasing her face. That's serious, Ethan. If people find out, it could ruin your name, your company. I don't care about any of that. He cut in. I care about you. The old kitchen clock ticked on the far wall, its soft sound filling the space like a heartbeat. Clara smiled faintly, bittersweet. You always were too good for this world, even as a boy. Ethan looked down, remembering the bruises, the empty lunchboxes, the schoolyard fights. Clara had been the only one who ever stood up for him when he was a nobody with nothing but oversized dreams. She had bathed his scraped knees, wiped his tears, made sure he had shoes that fit even if she had to wear second-hand ones herself. He wasn't about to let her suffer now. Lauren's heels clicked somewhere in the hallway behind them. Clara stiffened. Ethan stood straighter. Lauren entered with her phone in hand, her voice a practiced kind of warm. "Ethan, darling, I just got off the phone with the caterers. They're going to bring the revised menu tomorrow morning. And oh, Clara, I hope you're feeling better." Clara dipped her head, murmuring, "Yes, ma'am." Ethan turned to his wife. "Don't call her that." Lauren blinked. "Excuse me? She's not your maid. She's not your help. And she's not someone you get to tie to a chair." Lauren laughed nervously. "We're really still on that?" "It was a misunderstanding. No, it was abuse. Two make self." She paled. "I'm not playing along anymore," Ethan continued. "This isn't a game. From now on, if you look at her wrong, I'll know. If you speak to her like that again, I'll act." Lauren's smile faltered. "You're threatening me?" "I'm promising her protection." Lauren's jaw tightened. "This is my house too." Ethan stepped forward, his presence suddenly commanding. "Then, act like it, because if I see one more bruise, hear one more insult, find one more reason to question your decency, this won't be your house much longer." He looked at Clara. "Come on, Mom, let's go for a walk." Clara hesitated, then slowly stepped toward him, her movements careful but deliberate. Ethan offered his arm, and she took it. They walked past Lauren, who stood frozen in place, her phone still in her hand but forgotten. As they stepped into the cool California night, Clara breathed in the sea air like it was a freedom she hadn't felt in years. "I'm sorry to cause all this," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "You didn't cause anything. You've done nothing wrong." They reached the wooden bench Clara had asked to have placed in the garden, a small request from a woman who never asked for much. Ethan helped her sit. "I used to look up at these stars when you were just a boy," Clara said, gazing upward. "I'd pray you'd grow up kind. Not rich, not famous kind. Looks like God did all right." Ethan smiled softly, his heart aching. "Mom," he said after a long pause, "what she did today, has she done anything like that before?" Clara hesitated. Then, without looking at him, she said, "Worse, just quieter." Ethan looked out into the dark, his jaw clenched. "Then we're going to make some noise." The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan's study, warming the oak shelves lined with awards, business biographies, and framed photographs of gala nights and venture summits. But none of those mattered now. Ethan sat behind his desk, still in a plain black t-shirt, his laptop open before him. The cursor blinked steadily on the email he couldn't bring himself to finish. Subject: Private Inquiry. To Marcus Rivera. He had typed the first sentence 3 times and erased it each time. What did one even say in a situation like this? "My wife is abusing my mother." Didn't quite capture the betrayal. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He needed proof. He needed leverage. And most of all, he needed justice. He finally settled on a concise, purposeful note. "Marcus, let's move forward. I need full discretion. I want everything: digital trails, household staff interviews, footage if available. Assume nothing. My mother's life is in danger, and I won't tolerate another day of this. E.g." He hit send. A soft knock came at the door. It wasn't Lauren. Her knock was sharper, more entitled. This one was hesitant. "Come in," Ethan said, voice still rough with the edge of sleep. Clara stepped in, dressed in a neat cardigan and gray slacks, her hair combed and tied back like she always did when she was preparing to look proper. That alone told him she was trying to hide her pain under layers of control. "You got a minute, baby?" she asked. "Always," he said, gesturing to the leather armchair across from him. She didn't sit. Instead, she walked to the bookshelf and gently touched the frame holding a picture of them at his first IPO celebration. Ethan in a tuxedo, grinning wide. Clara in her Sunday church dress, too modest for the occasion, but glowing with pride. "That was a good day," she murmured. "It was your day more than mine." She smiled but didn't argue. "I got a call from an old friend this morning," she said, finally settling into the chair. You remember Mrs. Reynolds? The neighbor with the roses? Ethan asked. That's her. Clara chuckled softly. She called from Chicago. Said she tried sending a letter here weeks ago. Never heard back. Then she saw me in a photo on some foundation website. Said I looked worn out. Ethan's jaw tensed. You never got the letter? Clara shook her head. Not a single one since June. That's impossible. We get mail daily. I asked Lauren about it once. She said maybe my friends forgot the new address. Ethan leaned back, connecting dots that painted a darker picture. Letters intercepted, communication cut off, isolation. It wasn't just emotional abuse. It was control, systematic, and cruel. He reached for his phone and opened the security app for the estate. You ever see Lauren with the mail? Clara hesitated. Sometimes she brings it in herself when you're not home. Ethan tapped through archived footage, days and weeks of surveillance. He noted the timestamps, marked the moments Lauren entered through the front gate on afternoons the housekeeper was off. She carried large white envelopes. None of them had ever made it to Clara's hands. As the evidence stacked, so did his fury. She was cutting you off from the people who still remember you, he said bitterly. Like she wanted to erase everything before me. I don't want this house to turn into a battlefield, Ethan, Clara said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her fingers. Ethan stood up. Mom, this already is a battlefield. You're just not the one who declared war. A chime on his laptop broke the silence. An email from Marcus. Subject: Initial findings, confidential. Ethan opened the message and scanned quickly. Marcus had managed to access metadata from Lauren's phone backup stored on her cloud. It included several flagged conversations from a private WhatsApp group titled West Coast Wives. One preview read, Lauren, David's old maid is getting confused again. Yesterday I caught her using the master bathroom. I reminded her that servants use the back one. 8. Another. These people never understand boundaries. I swear. One more slip and I'm filing for legal guardianship. Ethan stared at the screen, a coldness rising in his chest. It was worse than he imagined. Lauren wasn't just mistreating Clara, she was documenting it. Gathering false evidence. Preparing a legal case to have Clara declared mentally unfit. And if Ethan hadn't come home early, she might have succeeded. Clara stood and came around the desk to see the messages. He turned the screen toward her, unsure if he wanted her to read them but knowing she deserved to know. Her lips moved silently as she read, the light dimming in her eyes. When she looked at him again, something inside her had changed. Not just sorrow, resolve. She wants me gone, Clara said softly. Out of your life, erased like a smudge on a window. Ethan looked at her, heart aching. She underestimated both of us. Clara looked out the window. Do you know what the hardest part is? He waited. It's not the names she called me, not the cold dinners or the looks. It's that I knew, from the first day, she didn't want me here. And I stayed anyway. Because I didn't want you to lose your peace. Ethan reached for her hand and held it gently. You're the reason I have any peace. And I won't let anyone take that from me. She squeezed his hand back, then smiled sadly. You always were the brave one. Even at 7 years old, when that boy took your lunch money, you chased him down the block. He smiled at the memory. You told me not to back down when something mattered. Well, she said, standing up straight, her spine suddenly tall and proud. I think this matters. Ethan rose beside her. Then let's fight. Clara nodded once. But promise me something. Anything. Don't lose your kindness in the process. Anger can make a man hard. Don't let it hollow you out. 232. He nodded solemnly. I won't. I'll use it to build something better. As they stepped out of the study, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus. I have someone you need to meet. Former Sunny Glades staff. She left because of what she saw. She's willing to talk. Ethan looked at Clara. We're not alone in this. No, baby, she said, taking his arm. We never were, Wasak added. Ethan woke before dawn the next morning, long before the sun began to brighten the Pacific horizon outside his bedroom balcony. He lay still for several minutes, listening. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, only watchful. like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lauren wasn't in bed. Her side of the mattress was cool, untouched. He checked the ensuite bathroom empty. Checked her walk-in closet, also empty. Odd, but not surprising. She sometimes slept in the guest room after nights when she'd needed space. Last night, she'd needed more than space. She'd needed excuses, explanations, and she'd provided plenty, none of them believable. Ethan pulled on a sweater and headed downstairs. The estate's main level glowed with soft morning light, muted gold spilling across polished marble and stainless steel appliances. And in that quiet glow, he saw a familiar silhouette standing at the kitchen counter. Clara. Her back was to him, and even from behind he could tell something was off. She wasn't moving with her usual gentle rhythm, that careful grace built from decades of nursing and caretaking. Instead, she stood still, too still, holding a dish towel in her hand like she had forgotten what she was doing. "Mom?" Ethan said softly. She startled, the towel slipping slightly. "Oh, baby. You scared me." "I didn't mean to," he said, stepping closer. "You okay?" She nodded, though she didn't quite meet his eyes. "Just cleaning up a bit. Thought I'd get a head start." He scanned the counters. They weren't dirty, not even remotely. Clara had already cleaned them 3 times yesterday. The sink, too spotless. When people cleaned a clean kitchen, they weren't cleaning. They were trying not to break. "You didn't sleep," Ethan said quietly. She shook her head, smiling in that tired, motherly way she always had, an expression meant to protect him, not herself. "Couldn't." The hand was throbbing. And, well, some words are louder at night. Ethan stepped forward and gently took her hand, turning it over in his own. The skin across her knuckles was bruised, a muted purple that hadn't been there yesterday morning. The faint imprint of a heel still lingered, even though she had iced it. His throat tightened. "Mom," he whispered, "I should have been home sooner." "Oh, don't you start that," she scolded softly. "Life takes us to different places. You were building something important. I was just holding this old house together. You weren't supposed to hold it alone." Clara looked at him, warmth and pain mixing in her gaze. "You came back. That's what matters." Ethan exhaled shakily, letting go of her hand. "I'm going to make this right." Before Clara could respond, a door opened behind them, slow, deliberate. Lauren walked into the kitchen wearing silk pajamas and a robe that tied loosely around her waist. She looked rested, polished, like last night had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience she had gracefully brushed aside. "Oh," she said brightly. "You two are up early." Ethan's jaw clenched. Clara instinctively stepped back. Lauren went to the fridge and poured herself a glass of green juice. Moving with that effortless confidence she displayed at charity events, chin high, shoulders back, a quiet smile that fooled anyone who didn't know the truth. "So," Lauren said cheerfully, leaning on the counter. "What's the plan for today? Busy schedule, Ethan? I hope you remember we have the foundation meeting at 4. Ethan answered without emotion. "I'll be rescheduling." Her smile froze. "Oh? Yes. I have something more important to handle." She set down her glass. "And what would that be?" "Protecting my family." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "Ethan, if this is still about yesterday." "It's not just about yesterday," he said sharply. "It's about everything that's been happening when I'm not here." Lauren sighed at the ceiling. "Here we go again." Clara touched Ethan's arm gently. "Baby, maybe we should." "No," he said. "We don't hide anymore." Lauren gave a soft laugh. "You're being overly dramatic." "I didn't harm her. She spilled hot soup everywhere. I reacted. People react." "You stepped on her hand." Lauren shrugged. "She got in the way." "You tied her to a chair." "That was a joke." Ethan stared at her. "Do you actually believe that?" Lauren's expression hardened. "I believe that she's been overstaying her welcome. I believe she disrespects the boundaries of this household. And I believe she's pulling you into her emotional theatrics." "I go." Clara's shoulders sank. Ethan felt something deep inside him fracture. "You think she's performing?" he said flatly. "A 70-year-old woman with arthritis and a heart condition." Lauren crossed her arms. "She pretends to be fragile." "She is fragile." Lauren took a breath long, slow, controlled. You're being manipulated, Ethan. She wants you to feel guilty. She always has. That's what her kind does. Silence. Cold. Dead. Clara's breath hitched. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. Say that again. Lauren blinked, suddenly realizing what she had let slip. I didn't mean it that way. Yes, you did. I was talking about needy people. Not. She stumbled over the words, her composure finally cracking. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice so Clara wouldn't bear the weight of it. I see you now. Completely. And I won't unsee it. The digital clock on the oven beeped as the hour changed, the sound slicing through the tension. Lauren recovered her posture, straightening her robe. We can talk about this later, preferably in private. I don't want Clara involved in our marital issues. She is the issue, Ethan snapped. Or rather, the way you treat her is. Lauren gave him a cold smile. And what are you going to do? Hire a babysitter for her? Put cameras in every room? Ethan didn't blink. Already done. Lauren's smirk faltered. I'll be reviewing the footage today, he added. And everything else. Clara looked down, whispering, Ethan, don't provoke her. He turned to his mother, softening instantly. Mom, you won't be alone again. Not for 1 minute. She swallowed hard but nodded. Lauren stared at them both, something calculating flickering behind her eyes. So, that's how it's going to be, she said quietly. You choosing her over me. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth was already carved into the air between them, and Lauren felt it. She left the kitchen without another word, her heels clicking sharp and fast down the hall. Ethan and Clara remained in the silence she left behind, that old kitchen suddenly feeling like the safest room in the house. For now, baby, Clara whispered. This is only the beginning. I know, Ethan said, and I'm ready. Ethan stood alone on the balcony of his home office, the breeze from the Pacific carrying the scent of salt and eucalyptus. Malibu mornings were supposed to be serene, designed for green smoothies, surf reports, and light emails. Instead, this morning carried a charge, a storm of clarity sharpening in his mind. He checked his watch, 9:01 a.m., right on time. His phone buzzed just as he stepped back into the room. Marcus Rivera, incoming call. Ethan swiped to answer. Mr. Grant, said the voice on the other end gravelly. No nonsense. With the steady calm of someone who'd spent decades staring into the worst parts of humanity. Rivera, Ethan replied. Thanks for calling so quickly. You said it was urgent. I've worked elder abuse cases before, but this sounds layered. That's one word for it. Tell me everything. Ethan took a breath, pacing slowly in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her name is Clara Johnson. She's not my biological mother, but she raised me, took me in when no one else would. She's been living with us for the past year. Us? My wife Lauren and I. No kids. Clara has her own wing in the house. But lately, things have changed. She's withdrawn. Quiet. I came home early from a trip this weekend and found my wife had tied her to a kitchen chair. There was a pause. Repeat that? Rivera asked, voice sharper now. Tied her to a chair, Ethan said, spacing the words with cold precision. She said it was a joke, but Clara's hand was bruised. She'd been stepped on literally. And there's more. He explained the intercepted letters from Clara's friends in Chicago, the missing mail, the private WhatsApp group filled with veiled racism, the attempt to document false mental decline for future guardianship. She's building a case, Ethan said, to have Clara declared incompetent, trying to get her committed, maybe gain control of her affairs. Does your wife hold power of attorney? No, Ethan said. Clara's medical decisions are her own. But if Lauren can prove she's declining mentally, that could change. Rivera didn't answer immediately. Ethan could hear him scribbling notes. This isn't just abuse, the investigator said finally. It's calculated erasure. Psychological warfare under your roof. Yes. Do you have security footage? I do, but I've just started going through it. I also want to get into Lauren's devices, see if she's left a digital trail. Most people do, Rivera said. Even the smart ones. Especially the smart ones. Vanity always slips in. Ethan nodded. She's arrogant. She believes no one would ever believe Clara over her. That no one would ever believe me if I turned on her. Good. Let her keep believing that. It's how we win. Ethan turned toward the window again. Can you come today? I'm already in West LA. Text me your address. I'll be there in 40. Ethan ended the call and sent the address. Then he stood for a long moment. The sunlight painting long streaks across the hardwood floor. His reflection faint in the glass. This was no longer a suspicion. It was a mission. Marcus Rivera arrived in a silver Chevy Impala, not flashy, not new, but spotless and inconspicuous. He wore a dark brown jacket over a navy button-down shirt, a file tucked under his arm, and an expression like he hadn't smiled since 2003. Ethan met him at the front door. Thanks for coming, he said, shaking the man's hand. Rivera's grip was firm. Let's work. Inside, Ethan led him not to the main living area, but to a smaller den. Clara had always liked the one with the fireplace and the older books, a room Lauren never used. Clara was there, sitting in her favorite armchair, reading a worn novel by Toni Morrison. She looked up, startled, as Ethan entered with the stranger. Mom. This is Marcus Rivera, Ethan said. A friend. Someone here to help. Rivera approached gently, removing his cap. Ma'am, he said with quiet respect. I know this is strange, but I'd like to ask you a few things. Only what you're comfortable sharing. Clara looked to Ethan, then back at Rivera. If my son trusts you, I do too. Oat. Rivera sat beside her, notebook open, recorder set between them. He spoke softly, asking about how long Clara had lived in the home, what her daily routine was like, who she interacted with when Ethan wasn't home. Clara answered with poise, her voice steady but each word was wrapped in pain. I try to keep to myself, she said. She doesn't like when I talk too much. Says I linger. So I started staying in the garden more. Rivera nodded. Have there been any threats? Clara hesitated. Not in words, always, but the pressure, the stares. She once stood in the hallway while I was on a call with my friend Evelyn, just stood there, arms crossed, watching until I got so nervous I ended the call. Any physical harm? She spilled water once, told me to clean it. I slipped on it and hit my hip. Clara paused. She laughed, said it was a lesson in boundaries. Rivera's pen moved swiftly. Would you be willing to make a recorded statement? Clara looked down, her hands folded over her lap. Yes, she said at last, but not for revenge, only because I'm tired of feeling like I'm less than human in the home I helped build. Rivera gave her a respectful nod. That's enough for me. He turned to Ethan. We need her devices, laptop, phone, tablet, preferably when she's out. She has a spa appointment tomorrow, Ethan said. She'll be gone 3 hours. Perfect. I'll bring a full data extraction kit. We'll clone the devices. She won't even notice. In heaven. Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and fury stirring in his chest. How long before we know what we're dealing with? He asked. 2 days. Maybe 3. But I can already tell you, you're not crazy, and she's not safe. Clara, silent in her chair, finally looked up. Mr. Rivera, she said softly. What do women like her get out of this? Rivera's gaze didn't waver. Control, legacy, and the comfort of pretending that kindness has a color. Clara's eyes welled, but she didn't cry. Not yet, but soon, Ethan thought. Someone else would. The sun was just beginning to set, casting long golden streaks across the tile floors of the kitchen. Ethan sat alone at the breakfast table. Flipping through a folder Marcus had left behind a summary of early interviews, notes, and a preliminary profile of Lauren's behavior patterns. Each page made his chest tighten a little more. He didn't hear Clara until she entered. Her steps were soft, tentative. She wore her long gray cardigan, the one she only pulled out when the air felt heavy. In her hands, she carried a small plate. I made a sandwich, she said, placing it in front of him. Thought you hadn't eaten. Ethan looked down. Turkey and cheese on white bread. No crusts, just the way he liked it when he was a boy. Thanks, Mom, he said. But you should be resting. She sat across from him, slowly, favoring her bruised side. I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd check the kitchen before she got back. Ethan froze. Back? Where is she? Clara glanced toward the hallway, her voice lowering. She went to dinner, with the other women from her foundation group. She said, "It's nice to be around people who understand class." Ethan clenched his fist under the table. She told me not to touch anything while she was gone, Clara continued. Said I was making the counters smell like liniment and mothballs, too. He stood abruptly, pushing the chair back. That's it. Ethan, she started, her voice catching, but he was already across the room, tapping into the house's smart security system via the wall-mounted tablet. He rewound footage from earlier in the evening. The camera over the kitchen showed Clara carefully making herself dinner. He saw her slice an apple, place it on the side of a sandwich, and pour herself a glass of water. She moved slowly, cautiously, like someone living under occupation in their own home. Then Lauren entered the room. Ethan's jaw tightened as he watched the silent footage. Lauren walked in, her heels clicking like gunshots. Clara greeted her, visibly nervous. Lauren didn't return the greeting. She walked to the plate, sniffed the air, then swiped the sandwich off the table with the back of her hand. The apple slices rolled to the floor. The footage showed Clara dropping to her knees, quietly cleaning up while Lauren stood over her. Her mouth moved, undoubtedly scolding her, but the camera had no audio. Then, Lauren reached for the plate, held it up, and shoved it into the trash can. Clara stayed on the ground. Ethan's hands shook as he tapped into the basement camera feed. 2 hours later, the footage showed Clara descending the stairs. The lighting was dim. She held a new plate. Identical sandwich. No apple this time. She sat at the small folding table near the laundry units alone and ate in silence. She hadn't told him that part. Ethan turned from the screen and faced Clara. Why didn't you say anything? She shrugged. You were already carrying enough. You're eating in the basement. She smiled weakly. It's quieter down there. Feels more mine. Ethan turned back to the tablet. I need to see more. He fast-forwarded several days of footage. The pattern was horrifying. Each time he traveled, Lauren took total control. She withheld meals, cut the heater at night. Once, Clara was seen sleeping on the couch in the den, wrapped in a blanket, her room too cold to use, and still, Clara never said a word. I was waiting for you to see it, she said quietly behind him, but not because I wanted revenge. I wanted to know I wasn't imagining it. Ethan looked at her. And in that moment he saw the little boy he used to be hiding his bruises, pretending he'd fallen on the playground, when really he'd been pushed, shoved, taunted for being the foster kid. Clara had always known the truth without needing the words. Now it was his turn. Mom, he said, stepping closer. This stops now. She nodded, swallowing hard. You're sure? I'm sure. His phone buzzed Marcus again. Marcus Rivera. She's planning something. Found a draft email to a lawyer guardianship paperwork. Not submitted yet, but it's detailed. Too detailed for a whim. Ethan showed Clara the message. She wants to make you legally incompetent, he said. Take control. Institutionalize you. That's why she's documenting things. That's why she keeps saying you're confused or losing track of time. It's a setup. Clara's hands gripped the edge of the table. She asked me last week if I ever hear things at night. Ethan nodded grimly. She's planting the seeds. He stood, suddenly clear-headed, focused. We're turning the tide now. I'm not just going to stop her, I'm going to expose her. Ethan, Clara said carefully, promise me one thing, anything. Don't become like her. Don't let this fill you with hate. His expression softened. I won't. But I won't let kindness keep me silent either. That night, Ethan pulled the remaining security footage into a drive, flagged key moments, and forwarded them to Marcus for cataloging. The evidence was mounting, and so was the plan. Lauren still didn't know he'd seen it. She still thought he believed the smiles, the half-lies, the well-practiced concern. That would be her greatest mistake. It was nearly midnight when Ethan stepped into his private office, careful not to wake Clara, who had finally drifted into a light sleep after much coaxing and a warm compress for her bruised hand. The mansion was dark except for the glow from his dual monitors. On the desk sat a fresh drive delivered by Marcus earlier that evening, its contents decrypted and catalogued. Ethan inserted the USB, the screen flickering to life with folders labeled Device Extraction, L, Grant, iPhone, iPad, MacBook Pro. Inside, a document caught his eye first. WCW Chat Archive, full thread export. He opened it. His breath caught as the screen filled with message after message from a WhatsApp group named West Coast Wives. The profile photos were polished women in pearls and designer sunglasses, posing in art galleries and at fundraisers. But their words were anything but polished. Lauren, she tried to eat upstairs again, told her the trash is where she belongs if she can't follow rules. Jennifer Walsh, you're still letting her live there? My God. Charity is one thing, but she's practically growing roots. Patricia Sterling, we had to sedate my mother-in-law. Sometimes they need help letting go of power. Lauren, working on it. Once I have enough proof she's losing it, I'll talk to David's lawyer. Playing the long game, Ethan stared at the thread, bile rising in his throat. They weren't just gossiping, they were strategizing, sharing tips on how to push out elderly relatives under the guise of care. These women, who championed public philanthropy and women's leadership on panels and press releases, were orchestrating quiet cruelty behind closed doors. He scrolled further. Lauren, David's obsessed with this woman. He thinks she's his saint, but saints age too. Soon she won't remember where the bathroom is. And then Sunny Acres. Sunny Acres. He opened another folder titled Legal Prep, Guardianship. Inside, a pre-filled guardianship petition, false incident logs, and a fake doctor's evaluation template. Lauren had written incident reports like she was writing a novel. March 5. Clara wandered into the master suite at 2 a.m. Didn't know where she was. Called me, Mama. April 10. Found her putting her shoes in the dishwasher. Claimed it was a washing machine. All fabricated, all time-stamped, all ready to be signed. Ethan leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. This was no longer suspicion. It was a documented conspiracy, one Lauren had put into writing, one she'd shared with her socialite network like a how-to manual for institutional gaslighting. He picked up the phone and called Marcus. Got everything, he said when the detective answered. She's been building her case for months. She even has a fake doctor's report. Marcus grunted. Typical. The more they have to lose, the more precise the lies. Grafta. I want to do this the right way, Ethan said. I want her gone. But I want the world to see her for what she is first. You mean expose her publicly? Yes. And the others. If she's done this, chances are her friends have too. This isn't just about Clara anymore. It's systemic. There was a pause. I've worked these cases, Ethan. You go public, you'll be dragging the wives of powerful men into the spotlight. CEOs, politicians, real estate empires. Let them burn. Eyes. You'll make enemies. Ethan's voice was firm. Good. Marcus chuckled softly, the sound more admiration than amusement. All right. I'll prep a press brief. I've got a journalist at the LA Times who specializes in elder abuse and white-collar cover-ups. Female reporter. She'll understand. Make sure Clara's name stays protected, Ethan said. She's not the story. Lauren is. I'll frame it right, Marcus assured. Malibu elite wives exposed elder abuse in designer packaging. Was Zitter. Ethan hung up and stared at the screen again. He clicked into the photo folder thousands of images Lauren had saved over the months. Parties, dinners, award nights. There were also pictures of Clara surveillance shots Lauren had taken without her knowing. Clara cleaning, Clara sitting alone, Clara sleeping on the den sofa. Each one was labeled with captions like, "More signs of confusion, note how she wore slippers outside," or, "Caught trying to eat breakfast before we came downstairs." Loss of impulse control? Ethan gripped the edge of the desk. He knew Lauren could be cold. He never imagined she could be methodical. Then he saw the final folder. Final play, backup plan. Inside, a draft email to Lauren's personal lawyer. Subject, emergency institutionalization option. If David doesn't agree, we can leverage media appearances, say she's mentally deteriorating. He won't risk his brand. If he fights it, make it about safety and liability. Remind him about the electronics fire she caused. Note, create fake record. That was it. This wasn't just manipulation. It was character assassination. And it was premeditated. Ethan stood, eyes scanning the dark mansion outside his office window. Somewhere down the hall, Lauren was sleeping, believing she still controlled the narrative, still believed she could win. She didn't know that every one of her digital footprints had been lifted, traced, and preserved. And soon, they would be weaponized. Not for revenge, for justice, the way Clara had taught him all those years ago. He remembered being 10 years old, coming home with a bloodied lip. Clara had cleaned the wound, looked him in the eye, and said, "They'll always try to rewrite your story, baby. That's why you learn to write it better than they ever could." Tomorrow, the first draft of Lauren's downfall would begin. The next morning brought a strange, deceptive calm. The skies above Malibu were cloudless. Birds chirped from the garden hedges. And yet, inside the Grant estate, tension moved like an invisible current, coiling through the hallways and under the door frames. Ethan stood at the breakfast counter, stirring his coffee absently, when Clara walked in holding an envelope. Her face was unreadable. "This came today," she said quietly. "It was slipped under my door." Ethan took the envelope and turned it over. No return address. Just his mother's name, Clara Johnson, written in delicate, unfamiliar script. He opened it and unfolded a single sheet of ivory paper. "Clara, we haven't spoken in years, but I saw your name mentioned in a donor list for the Grant Family Trust, and I thought it might be you. I hoped it was. I'm writing from Chicago. Remember me? Evelyn Barnes, from New Hope Church. I wrote you a few months ago after my husband passed, but never heard back. I figured you might have moved again, or maybe you didn't get the letter. Clara, a few of us from the old choir group have been worried. We heard whispers someone said you'd gone quiet, that you weren't answering calls or mail, that something felt off. I hope I'm wrong. I don't mean to intrude. I just want you to know that if you ever need anything at all, you can call me. I still live at the same place on South Racine. You're not forgotten, Clara. You're loved. With faith, Evelyn." Ethan's grip tightened around the letter. "I never saw the first one," Clara murmured. "Lauren must have thrown it away. Just like the birthday card from my niece. Just like the Christmas letter from the Wilsons." Ethan nodded grimly. "She was isolating you, keeping you away from anyone who might give you perspective or help." Clara leaned against the counter. "I used to think I was just imagining things. But Evelyn always had a good spirit. She'd never just stop writing." Ethan folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. "I'm going to reply. Not from your account, from mine. And I'm going to explain everything, because I think Evelyn might be able to help." "She's no fighter, Ethan," Clara said gently. "She's a church lady who still mails coupons and writes Christmas carols. But church ladies know how to organize," Ethan said. "And she's not the only one Lauren kept away from you." 2000. He pulled out his laptop, opened a blank document, and began typing. Subject: What you should know about Clara Johnson. Dear Evelyn, my name is Ethan Grant. Clara raised me when no one else would. She is my mother in every way that counts. I'm reaching out because I believe you've been trying to contact her, and your efforts have been deliberately blocked. I can't say much over email, but what I can say is this. Clara is safe now. But she hasn't been. She's been silenced, manipulated, and mistreated by someone in this house who claims to care for her. We are working with investigators and legal experts to bring the truth to light. I have reason to believe others, perhaps many others, are going through similar things behind closed doors. If you know of anyone who has witnessed, experienced, or even suspected similar patterns, especially among high-profile families or caregivers, please ask them to come forward. Quiet voices, when gathered, become thunder. Clara is not alone, and neither are they. With deep gratitude, Ethan Grant, Clara stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. I don't want to cause a scene, she whispered. I just want to be treated like a person. You're not causing a scene, Ethan replied. You're reclaiming your place. Just as he hit send, the front door opened. Lauren walked in, wearing oversized sunglasses, a tan leather coat, and that familiar, rehearsed smile, the one she wore to deflect, disarm, and dominate. She had her phone in one hand and a to-go matcha latte in the other. Well, good morning, she sang. Isn't it a little early for family conferences? Ethan stood and walked over, calm and steady. I got a letter from Clara's old friend, the one whose mail you threw away. Lauren's lips curled into a tight smile. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. She sipped her latte. Look, if she's confused again, that's not my fault. She's not confused. But you are if you think this ends quietly. Lauren's smile faltered. Excuse me? I've seen the videos, Lauren. I've read the messages, the group chats, the legal drafts. Her grip tightened around the coffee cup. You had no right. I had every right, he interrupted. You built a false reality inside this house. You tried to gaslight the woman who raised me into believing she was losing her mind. Lauren's voice dropped, sharp. You're not thinking clearly. Ethan stepped closer, just enough to lower his voice without losing intensity. No. I'm thinking clearer than I have in years. You crossed a line, and now you're going to face the consequences. Lauren blinked rapidly, the first sign of panic creeping into her practiced expression. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you the truth, and when the truth comes out, I don't want you near Clara, or this house, or me. She laughed, brittle and hollow. You think you'll win a public war against me? Against us? The world doesn't care about a maid? She's not a maid, Ethan growled. She's my mother. The silence that followed was thunderous. Lauren's jaw twitched, and without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed toward the stairs. Ethan didn't follow. He didn't need to. The tide had turned. Back in the kitchen, Clara wiped her eyes quietly, the letter from Evelyn still pressed between her palms like a lifeline. You said quiet voices can become thunder, she whispered. They can, Ethan said. Then maybe it's time we made some noise. The air shifted the next day, as if the very house itself sensed that something had snapped loose and would never return to place. Lauren stayed mostly in her bedroom, the door shut, her phone glued to her hand. Occasionally, Ethan heard her pacing or speaking in hushed, clipped tones. Once, he heard her curse soft but vicious, like a dog snapping behind a closed gate. Ethan didn't engage. He had other work to do. Clara sat on the patio that morning, wrapped in her cardigan, sunlight warming her face. She looked peaceful, but her hands trembled as she stirred her tea. Are you sure about this? She asked, as Ethan opened his laptop again. It's one thing to send Evelyn a letter, but going public. He met her gaze. She taught me to speak up when I saw wrong. This is me doing that. Clara gave him a long, sad look. It's never been easy for people who look like me, baby. Not in courtrooms, not in newspapers, not even in families. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. You carried me when no one else would. This is my turn. She blinked away tears, her voice dry. Just don't let it steal your softness. I won't, he said, but I'll use my voice. And so he did. By noon, Ethan had sent a secure email package to Marcus, containing every piece of digital evidence. The chat logs, the guardianship paperwork, the photos Lauren had secretly taken, the videos of abuse. Accompanying it was a full letter, written in his voice, but speaking for Clara and for every silenced voice like hers. That afternoon, Marcus delivered the materials personally to the Los Angeles Times. By evening, the story had a name: The Silent Room. When Power Becomes Abuse. In California's elite homes. The article dropped the next morning. Front-page digital headline, full layout. A sprawling, multi-part investigation co-authored by an investigative journalist and a legal columnist. It detailed systemic patterns of elder manipulation among affluent families centered on the Grant estate. Lauren's name was featured. Quotes from the WhatsApp group were included. Direct messages, legal documents, timelines, inconsistencies. The article didn't just expose Lauren, it exposed others. Women from the WCW chat, caught saying things too cruel to spin. Names like Patricia Sterling and Jennifer Walsh were now linked to a pattern of psychological warfare masquerading as care. And most devastating of all, it included a photo. A single still from Ethan's security footage. Clara, in her nightgown, tied to the kitchen chair, her eyes glancing downward, humiliated, motionless. The caption read, Clara Johnson, 73, raised her foster son into one of Malibu's most powerful men. This is how she was repaid. The photo spread like wildfire, and with it came the thunder. The phone calls began within hours. Ethan muted them all. Reporters, TV shows, morning programs wanting exclusive interviews, even Oprah's people called. He declined them all. He wasn't interested in celebrity justice. What he was interested in, however, was the inbox full of hundreds, soon thousands of emails from strangers, sons, daughters, caregivers, home nurses, people who had seen, heard, or lived through exactly what Clara had. One email came from a woman in Detroit. I saw my stepmother do the same thing to my dad. I thought I was crazy. Thank you for showing me I wasn't. Another from Oregon. My grandmother stopped writing me years ago. I thought she'd forgotten. Now I wonder if someone kept her letters from reaching me. And another from Evelyn Barnes herself. Dear Ethan, I cried reading the article. I cried because I knew something was wrong. Clara was always the strongest voice in the choir. She held the whole soprano section together back when we had no microphones and too many cracked floorboards. Please tell her this. We're organizing something. Sunday. A virtual vigil. The choir's coming together again. Not for a song, but to stand with Clara. She gave her life to kindness. Now we're going to return the favor. With love, Evelyn. Clara held the letter in her hands that night as Ethan read it aloud. They remember me, she whispered. Ethan smiled. Of course they do. They still have the same choir? She asked, her voice trembling. Looks like they never stopped. It's season little do have. She pressed the letter to her heart. And for the first time in days, she laughed. It wasn't loud. It was gentle. Fragile. But it was real. Then came the knock at the front door. Ethan tensed and walked over. It wasn't a reporter. It was Lauren's lawyer. A pale, slim man with nervous eyes and a clipboard. He extended a single envelope. Mr. Grant, I've been asked to deliver this by Mrs. Lauren Grant. It concerns a separation of assets and a proposal for quiet resolution. She would prefer not to litigate. Ethan took the envelope and nodded once. You can tell her I already resolved it. The man blinked. I don't follow. I've resolved to never allow someone like her in my life again. Ethan shut the door. Back inside, Clara stood with her back straight, her tea in hand, her expression calm. I heard him, she said. Is it over? No, Ethan replied. But we're winning. She stepped closer and cupped his face with her weathered hands. Then don't stop now, she said. Because there are others who can't speak yet. Others still locked in rooms with no windows. He nodded slowly. Let's open the doors. The Sunday evening air carried the kind of hush that seemed to settle over neighborhoods just before something holy. The sun had dipped below the ocean's edge, streaking the Malibu sky with hues of lavender and amber. Inside the Grant estate, every light in the house had been dimmed except for the soft glow in the living room, where Clara sat in her favorite chair upright, dressed in a deep navy blouse and pearl earrings she hadn't worn in years. Ethan stood nearby, setting up the laptop on the antique coffee table. A webcam pointed toward Clara, capturing the faint warmth in her eyes and the way her hands clutched a crocheted handkerchief stitched by her late friend Linda back in Chicago, decades ago. You don't have to speak, Ethan reminded her gently. They just want to see you, to stand with you. Clara gave a quiet smile. For most of my life, Ethan, I was background, the one who made others shine. Maybe it's time I stepped into the light, even if just for a moment. The screen flickered. Then it filled with faces, dozens at first, then hundreds. Windows upon windows of women and men, some elderly, some middle-aged, Some young gathered in living rooms, churches, community centers, each one holding a candle. Some had placed framed photographs beside them. Photos of mothers, grandmothers, aunts, friends. Names filled the chat. For Aunt Sarah, for Mama Dell, for Miss Ethel. At the top of the grid was Evelyn Barnes. She wore a royal purple choir robe, her hair pulled back, her expression proud and maternal. "Clara," Evelyn said, her voice trembling through the speakers. "You always said kindness was a seed that would grow in silence. But tonight, it sings." The candles across the screen flickered, glowing in synchrony like stars blinking into existence. Then, softly like the whisper of a remembered lullaby, Evelyn began to sing. "Precious Lord, take my hand." One by one, the voices joined in, rich altos, worn tenors, fragile sopranos. Clara's eyes welled as the old spiritual washed over the screen, reaching through decades, through silence, through heartbreak. It was the same song they had sung at the funeral of her own mother, the same one she had hummed while cleaning the Grant family's kitchen, the same one she had whispered to Ethan when he couldn't sleep. Now, it held her, wrapped her, lifted her. When the final note faded, Clara leaned slightly forward. "I don't know what to say," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I don't know how to thank you all for remembering me, for reminding me that I wasn't just surviving, that I was loved." Evelyn wiped her eyes. "You were never forgotten." Then someone new unmuted a woman in her 40s from Atlanta. "My grandma's caregiver wouldn't let me visit," she said. "Said she got anxious around people. We found out after she passed that it was all lies. But no one believed us. No one saw us. Until now." AD. Another woman. "My uncle was forced into assisted care. Turns out his son wanted the house." A man. "My mother's letters stopped. I thought she forgot me. Turns out her nurse thought I was bad influence because I was gay." Voice after voice filled the space, each one a piece of a tapestry that had remained invisible for too long. Ethan sat back and let it flow. This wasn't just a vigil. It was a reckoning. The next morning, the ripple effect began. News outlets picked up the vigil story. The LA Times ran a follow-up with screenshots of the virtual gathering. NPR interviewed Clara and Evelyn about the broader issue of elder silencing. Advocacy groups launched helplines and support forums for family members who suspected similar abuse. One headline stood out: "Black Elders, Silenced No More, a movement is born in Malibu." Ethan watched all